Remember, the content on our show is for information only.
It is not intended to provide medical or other professional advice. Welcome to Placebo, the podcast where each week my brother and I take turns teaching each other something about healthcare or medicine. I'm Kaylin Richards, and this is my brother.
And I'm Logan Richards.
So, I want to talk about today's topic. So, it's a bit of a stretch.
What is today's topic?
I'm not going to tell you yet. It's a bit of, if you downloaded the episode, you would have seen it.
But I haven't downloaded it yet.
It's maybe a bit of a stretch for our theme of our podcast, but maybe not. We'll see what you think.
We don't really have a fully formed theme.
Healthcare or medicine?
Yeah, but that's pretty broad.
Okay, so see what you think about this.
Okay.
All right, I'm just going to go right into this.
You still haven't told me what this episode's about.
So, what our topic is about is how space travel affects people, and in particular looking about how like long-term space travel, maybe the way of the future, I think would be super cool. Is it really feasible, though, for people, and what are the things that can be done?
So how space travel affects your health?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds healthcare related.
Is, sort of, right? It may be not related to your everyday healthcare, but there are also aspects of research done for space travel, space medicine they call it, that could be more applicable to everyday health too, and we'll maybe get into some of those things.
Okay.
So in a lot of pop culture depictions of space travel, you know, Star Wars, Star Trek, what are some other space things? The Martian.
Battlestar Galactica.
Battlestar Galactica. There's not much emphasis placed on how... Firefly, that's a classic. There's not much emphasis placed on how people are surviving in space, which is really an inhospitable environment for people.
Right.
Right?
We just kind of assume that it's their spaceships.
They're spaceships, and they're fine.
Yeah.
But really, it's not that simple. And so what we're going to look at today is how people have survived in space so far, and what are things that are going to be challenges from a health perspective, as we look at longer-term space missions, such as potentially like a trip to Mars.
Okay, exciting.
Okay? In the history of like manned space flight on Earth, most people have not been off of the Earth for like long periods of time, like a week, 2 weeks, something like that. So a lot of these issues didn't come up as much then.
Well, hasn't that changed just recently?
Yeah, but so now there's the International Space Station, the ISS.
Right.
And so there was recently a twin study completed by NASA. They had 2 twin brothers that are astronauts, which seems small odds.
Fortunate.
Yeah. And this one astronaut, Scott Kelly...
Okay, he's the one that was up there for a really long time, right?
He had been selected for a year-long mission on the ISS, which is the longest. And then his twin brother was Mark Kelly, who is also an astronaut.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that they were twins.
Yeah. And so they could study exactly to see like what are the effects of spending a year in space with the exact model on Earth that could show what aging on Earth looks like for the exact
model.
Well, yeah, because usually even if you had like 2 guys that were the same age...
It's just funny to describe a person as a model.
2 guys that were the same age, they could age differently. They could have different factors in their life. These guys have had the same upbringing, the same genetics, the same career, so most things should be pretty equal for them.
The benefit of a twin study is for controlling variables.
As many as really possible in a free-ranging people study, not like lab animals or something.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of the research, well, really there hasn't been much research published based on this study yet. NASA is still working on it. It said they will share their study results in about a year from now.
Oh, okay. So this is ongoing.
So we don't really have the research from that study so far to talk about. But we can talk about lots of other stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
It'll be an interesting update in a year or so.
Maybe we can update maybe all this information is going to be wrong.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that Scott Kelly was doing while he was on the ISS was related to studying how the immune system works and studying how, in response to time, out of Earth's environment, and studying how different sort of pressure garments can work to help normalize the pressure in the human body.
Cool.
We'll talk about it. So there are kind of 4 major issues that we're going to health issues that come with long-term space travel that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
The first one...
Should I guess them?
Okay, yeah, guess them.
I think bone density.
That's one.
Muscle atrophy.
Sort of. It's related to a couple different things. Like bone density is part of that because you're not getting the
Okay, let's say...
resistive activity.
Yeah, okay.
And these are not...
Vascular issues?
Cardiovascular function. So these are not all of the problems. These are just some four main
major
ones.
Do I have 2 or do I have 3?
You have 2, bone density and cardiovascular function.
Okay. I am maybe out of ideas.
Okay. One is not as easy to think about. It's not as straightforward, I guess.
Bowel function.
We're going to talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
Actually, but it's not the main thing. So visual impairment intracranial pressure syndrome, VIP syndrome it's called.
VIP.
Okay, where they started to find out that astronauts returning from longer tours of duty, especially on the ISS, were having visual changes, and in some cases it would improve once they got back to Earth, in some cases not. Even like years later it stayed bad.
Okay, that's interesting.
So looking at what's going on with that. And then the last one is mental health, especially thinking about being contained to a small space for months and years, because a potential like manned mission to Mars would probably be about 2.5 years.
Right.
It would be about 6 months to and from.
So the isolation. And
then, isolation, and as far as like social isolation from your family, and then isolation in like space. Like you can't go out and take a long walk or something. You're just
can't
stuck.
They just video call people?
Well, okay, that's one thing. So we're going to start talking about VIP syndrome, the visual impairment intracranial pressure. Okay, so here's what they know about it so far. Like I said, some of the astronauts were finding that their vision was just going bad. Like they would see spots in their vision, like spots that they couldn't see, or floaters, they would say, like where you see something kind of floating through your field of vision. Mm-hmm. So they would get decreased. One astronaut said he noticed it. The first sign he noticed was that when he looked out the window at Earth wasn't clear anymore.
Oh, okay.
Or some people said they had to turn their head to the side in order to see clearly through their glasses.
Perhaps the window was dirty. They need to go on a spacewalk to clean the window.
It wasn't that.
Oh, okay.
And in some cases, it improved, like I said, once they got back to Earth. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, it did not, stayed bad. The other thing that they noticed is that this doesn't happen to everybody. So it's not like 100% of people get this after you've been off the Earth for a certain amount of time or something. And that men get it more than women. And
do they have a good sample to say that? I feel like there
are way more men than women that are astronauts. But with their percentages, there's been way more higher percentage of the men that have gotten it.
Okay.
It does increase with the length of time that you spend. So 29% of short duration, like 1-2 weeks, people with space flight reported this. And then 60% of the long duration crew members reported this.
Okay.
So it is kind of a major problem, though, if 60% after 6 months, which is the typical long duration stay on the ISS.
Now, remind me what the actual problem is. It's just blurred vision?
Can be various things. Spots in the vision, blurred vision.
Visual changes.
Visual changes.
Okay.
It's a little bit variable. They're not exactly sure what causes it.
Oh, good. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, so they have some theories. And have you seen pictures of astronauts or videos of astronauts when they're on the ISS?
Yes.
You can notice in the pictures that their face looks puffed up.
Oh, because pressure changes?
Yeah, because when you're normal in Earth gravity, the gravity keeps fluid down in the rest of your body. Yeah, so it says they typically have puffy faces and then get really skinny legs.
Oh, interesting.
Because of fluid changes in the body, especially happens within the first few days, can last throughout their stay. On Earth, the heart has to pump blood against gravity to get blood to the upper half of your body. It must work harder. In space, there is no gravity to pull fluids down, so they remain in the upper half of the body, causing puffy face and skinny legs. So they think that because all this fluid is up in your head for whatever reason, your vessels are not draining like they should, vessels like around the face and the eye and in the brain. And they have found that people get possibly, or they speculate that people are getting increased intracranial pressure, so increased pressure inside like inside the skull in the brain.
Right.
Because of all that extra fluid in there. And they think that that's putting pressure on sometimes the optic nerve, sometimes structures around the back of the eye, and causing damage.
Okay.
So I think...
This sounds to me, though, like it would cause more changes than just visual.
So you would think so, right?
Right. That's why I said it.
They don't have any better idea than that right now. That's their theory.
Huh.
So one of the things that... Was it Mark Kelly or Scott Kelly?
Scott.
One of the things that Scott Kelly was trying while he was on the ISS for this long-term deployment. Is that what they call it? I don't know.
Sure.
Deployment.
Mission.
Mission, that's better. Was a type of vacuum pants.
Oh.
Which are supposed to...
Tell me more.
They're supposed to pull fluid from the upper body down into the legs and decrease the pressure in the head to a more normal amount.
Vacuum pants.
So they didn't have a picture of what these looked like. I was really curious to know what this looked like because it said it was a rubber. It was made of rubber.
Creating some type of pressure gradient from in his lower body that allows it to for the fluids easier to flow. I think they must be
pulling the legs out, pulling the tissue on the leg out to draw the fluid down.
Yeah, so
I don't know.
So it would mean that inside of these vacuum pants, they would need an area of lower pressure to open up all of his vessels, right?
For the fluid to come down from the head and the brain and stuff.
Well, I think they're
trying. They're not sure this is the solution.
They're just trying to open the vessels to give it the path of least resistance.
Okay, so this is one thing that really has not been solved yet.
So they didn't have good results from their vacuum space
they're not
pants?
published. That was just something he was trying.
Oh, I'm interested to know if those work or not.
I don't know. Maybe they're for people with high blood pressure. This is going to be the solution on Earth.
Yeah, we need the opposite.
No, you want to open up the vessels to decrease the blood pressure.
But we need like a vacuum sweater.
Good.
Because blood pools in people's feet if they have vascular issues.
All right, so this is something they're still looking for the solution on. It is something that will have to be resolved, though, because this is, after 6 months or so, 60% of people are reporting, in some cases, pretty significant visual problems.
Yeah.
So if you're gone for 2.5 years, you don't want a crew that's entirely blind by the end, if this is something that keeps progressing.
I would agree with that.
Or that causes other neurological problems or brain function problems.
It seems to me, based on how they've described the problem, that there is going to be other issues that are not just visual.
Yeah.
If all they can think of is an increased intracranial pressure, then you could theoretically affect any region of the brain and have any type of neurological issue, not just vision.
Right. And one thing that doesn't make sense to me is it also says that the puffy face syndrome typically is worse when you first get there, then your body starts to figure it out and gets better over time. But people are reporting these visual changes are coming on the longer that they're there. So that doesn't quite pan out with the cause being pressure in the brain. I don't know.
All right. So more to come on that one.
Yeah. Next topic, bone density.
Oh, okay. I guessed this one.
Yeah. So osteoporosis is on Earth typically more common in women, and that's true on the space station as well. Do you know why osteoporosis, though, is such a big deal for everyone off of our normal gravity?
Well, I would guess that it has to do with Wolff's Law, which is just like that. I think it can have to do with anything, but in the case of bones, they react to the pressures and the forces that are put onto them. Mm-hmm. And so if you're in space, as opposed to on Earth where there's a gravity always pushing on your bones, in space there's not that. And so your bones, because of the way that they work, will not be as strong because they're not used to holding your body up against the force of gravity.
Right.
That's my guess.
So that is entirely right.
Woo!
With the absence of gravity, there's not a lot of resistance put on the bones, and the body thinks, well, they're not needed. All this strong bone, material is not needed. We can do better with this calcium for something else or whatever, I'm going to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. So what they do to prevent it. Do you know that?
No. Well, you said that in the movies, in the media, especially The Martian, which you mentioned that they didn't address this, but I think they did in The Martian.
A little bit they did, didn't they?
They had a gym that was spinning, like kind of getting the centrifugal force or whatever to emulate gravity. And I remember at one point there was a scene where one of the characters was running on a treadmill in their spinning gym thing.
So that's the thing. That's what they do.
So that was probably directly the only reason you would do that. I mean, obviously for exercise, but in space would be for the bone density and...
Right. So you do it for multiple reasons. One of the reasons is for bone density.
Yeah.
Because they don't have this spinning room that has normal gravity in it yet.
We don't have big enough spaceships
on every like space program, like on every space movie or TV show, most of the spaceships they seem to be just walking around in no problem.
A lot of them seem to have. They just decided that the ships make their own gravity somehow.
Because it's really hard to film a whole show with everyone floating all the time. I guess.
But there's like Ender's Game and that whole series, which was recently a movie.
I never saw that movie. Did they float?
No, their whole space station is a rotating wheel, so it just emulates gravity through the centrifugal force.
So I'm assuming it is harder to do in real life than it is in books or movies because
all they need is a spinning wheel.
Because you don't notice the ISS just has this microgravity, which clearly has a lot of problems associated with it. So. Maybe this is the solution. Make a spinning spaceship and then they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think so.
They do have, though, for now, since they don't have a way to change the gravity, they have a strap system with a treadmill. And they get strapped onto it, so they have pressure put on their bones and joints as they're running. They can run on it.
Weird.
So they're like all harnessed up and then they run.
So the straps maybe go over their shoulders to... force them down onto the treadmill.
And they're required to work out 2 hours per day, all the people on the space station.
Nice.
Yeah.
By workout, do you mean run, or they have other options?
I think it's mostly running. The problem is they can't lift a weight.
Well, I can't imagine that gives you the full effect, though, but it's...
That's why they do it for 2 hours, I guess.
What does the data say on that one?
It says that they have completely resolved the problem with osteoporosis and microgravity.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it fully treats it. So that's what they do for now.
That's impressive. I would not have expected that. What about in the arms? All they're doing is working the legs.
I don't know about the arms. The arms should be...
What about the spine?
Well, that's got pressure down through it. Yeah. I think the arms would be the only issue.
Or the neck. What about the skull? What if they fall down when they get back?
Okay. It has resolved the main issue in the leg bones and pelvis.
All right.
The next topic I have kind of a lot of information on is the mental health aspect. So there was a study that I read published in this PLOS1 journal. All of my articles seem to be coming from them lately. Looking at a pretend mission to Mars.
Okay.
So they took 6 people and they put them in a simulated spaceship.
Ooh.
And they kept them in there for 520 days.
Sounds like the ultimate video game.
Which is the expected time for the mission to Mars and back.
Oh, okay.
And then they gave them various, they communicated with them through mission control like you would expect on a mission that way. There were delays communicating because of the length of space as they got further and further away.
So they made it as real as possible.
They had to do different scientific tasks.
Without taking away the gravity, I assume.
That was the only thing. So that was one of their downsides of this study is that they had gravity still. So
I think if all of this results in some type of depressive type of effect, I think the lack of gravity might help that a little bit.
Yeah, they said that.
So you get to float around.
You think it'd be fun?
I think that'd be a mood booster.
Now, they said the parts of this study that could...
Limitations.
The limitations of this study was that they couldn't take into effect the microgravity. They couldn't do simulate the actual danger that you would be in on this type of mission. And they couldn't simulate the effects of radiation. So we'll talk a little bit more about radiation here.
Or simulate any of these health effects besides the mental
radiation
ones.
is a large problem with health effects too. One thing that they're thinking when considering these longer-term missions is that behavioral issues is one of the most serious health risks to the crew and the whole mission, because if one person becomes really mentally ill and is not able to fulfill their job, that kind of puts everyone else in danger.
I would say so.
Too. So they're trying to predict how people will react to like this long-term confinement to help with like crew selection and design of the spacecraft, and also with setting up what they call behavioral health countermeasures, which would be like video chats with your family or games, or, you know, what are the things that are going to make life fun, right?
That
Celebrating
makes sense.
holidays.
Seems like an important problem to solve before we fly off to Mars.
Right. So this study, it took place in Moscow, although it doesn't matter. They're inside, so they're in their little pretend spaceship.
Took place in a simulated spaceship anywhere in the galaxy.
It was completed in 2011, but this paper was published in 2014. And so the crew was 6 healthy adult males. They were meant to simulate kind of the type of people that would be on.
All Russians?
No, there were
who
3.
was this done by?
So this is it was a joint effort. So there were 3 Russians, 2 people from the European Space Agency, and 1 from the China National Space Agency.
Okay.
And they wanted to simulate that these would be astronauts. So they were people that had the type of work history that people that might be astronauts would have. So they were from the military, they were doctors or engineers. They had an average age of 32, which should be what they expect would be a good average age, I guess, for people doing this mission. They also trained together before going into their mission for their confinement for the 520 days. So they would have that team aspect built.
All right.
Okay. So their spacecraft was 550 meters cubed. Okay, so the ISS is about the size of a 6-bedroom house and is 935 cubic meters. This is 550.
So a little bit smaller.
So maybe a
3-bedroom
house, and there's 6 guys living in there. Still kind of close quarters.
Yeah.
So they conducted experiments. They had a schedule that was 2 days on where they would be working and 2 days off. It's pretty nice.
But you spend your off days in the same place that you work.
Yeah, you don't go anywhere. They isolated them from a normal light-dark cycle, because that would be another challenge of being on a spacecraft for that long. You don't have the normal day-night cycle, and a lot of people have found that they have trouble with sleep on the ISS.
Can't they just simulate that with lights?
They can, but I'll talk about it doesn't work for everybody.
Okay.
They had some simulated emergencies to simulate what would happen in an emergency.
Ooh, like
that
what?
They didn't say what it was, that they had to problem solve and solve.
The rear booster has exploded.
Yeah, whatever. They had regular mission control communication, but then it became delayed, as I said, as they were further and further away simulated.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, so here are their mental health findings. They had no depression. No one had depression when starting the mission, but one crew member had mild to moderate depression throughout most of it on the tests that they would fill out.
Okay.
So they speculated, though, that he might not really be the only one, because another test that they did looked at how people like to portray themselves to others. And this particular person, who always scored as somewhat depressed, he also scored as he doesn't really care how others think about him very much. So he maybe was more honest in his answering, and all the other people scored a lot higher in that they do care what people think about them.
So they're questioning whether their measurement of depression is actually worth anything.
So they're questioning, are people saying better than how they really feel because they want people to think well of them, or maybe they really feel fine?
Yeah.
It's hard to tell.
So they were using some type of survey
They were using a self-report depression screening tool,
Okay.
and then other psychometric measures. They thought, well, at least one guy is depressed, possibly more, but that's hard to prove or really look into with the data that they had. Another crew member had a lot of reported difficulty with sleep. He had a lot of insomnia. He couldn't fall asleep even because of this loss of the normal cycle.
Okay.
And they also found that because there isn't a normal cycle, a lot of people's body, I don't know why they just didn't keep a regular clock. Their body clocks are not 24 hours. They were more like 25 hours.
I have heard that before. I wonder if that's because of this study that people have said that.
Oh, there probably are other studies, but they found that people would get further and further apart from each other on when they were sleeping and when they were waking up.
Oh.
And that so some people were always asleep when the others were awake, and so they didn't see their crew members that often because some people were always sleeping, and others were awake, and then they would reverse.
Okay.
Which is weird. I don't know why they didn't just have a clock and stick to their schedule. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, it's an experiment.
Yeah. So they also found that the crew members became a lot more sedentary with the delays in communication. So when there was nothing, like when there was no communication given to them that you should be doing this at this time, they just sat around and didn't do anything.
I feel like I would get pretty bored.
And they felt like that's the one thing they wanted to address is that they don't want people getting bored because then you start to feel stuck and then you start to feel like these negative psychological effects. So they wanted to address like boredom and keeping people from being bored when there would be these long delays in communication.
Why don't they just get them an Xbox? Put it in.
I don't know.
That would keep me satisfied for 560 days.
They determined with the data that they had from this study, 2 out of the 6 crew members had psychological or behavioral disturbances throughout the study.
Okay.
And of course, some of them could be underreporting too, so it could be more. So that's like a third.
Sure.
Of the people on this mission,
exactly a third
is not insignificant, right?
No.
Yeah. So they did find, however, an interesting thing is that there had been speculation, and I guess found in other circumstances, of a third quarter effect, which is...
What does that mean?
No matter how long the thing that you're doing is, when you're in like the third quarter of it, you kind of lose steam. Like if you're running a half marathon, you lose steam when you're about 3/4 of the way done.
Oh, that's interesting.
But if you're running a marathon, you lose steam about 3/4 of the way through.
So that has to do with your perception of how long the thing that you're doing is supposed to be.
Right. So they were thinking that they would find a 3/4 effect in this, that people would have like a real low point around...
Oh. I've never heard of this 3/4
time.
Effect.
It makes sense, though. They said it applies to like a lot of different areas, but apparently not long-term confinement for space travel. They didn't find any evidence of this.
Did they know how long they were going to be in there?
Oh, yeah.
And they were counting days?
I would assume they had calendars. They had communication with their mission control.
Yeah, that one's interesting. I feel like that has to do more with perception of time and effort and things like that. Maybe it's too long.
Maybe. So what they found, though, was that people's behavior was steady throughout. Like, as soon as they were basically in it, the person that was depressed started reporting depression. As soon as they were in it, the person that had trouble sleeping had started having trouble. And so their thought was that they need to determine more specific screening tools for what really they're exactly looking for, but that people that are okay for, 4 months on the ISS are probably the same people that are going to do okay for a longer-term mission. They're not going to change as they go longer out.
That's weird, though. I feel like, doesn't it seem weird to you that they didn't have a better screening tool for depression?
Than self-report?
Yeah.
Well, how else, what's the thing besides self-report? Only you can know how you feel.
Having someone clinically diagnose it, right?
I think it is based on answering questions as to how you feel. No one else can know what you're thinking.
I know, but there's got to be a better way to diagnose it. Did they use the gold standard diagnosis survey?
I didn't write down the name of the test that they used.
It just seems weird to me.
It is a depression scale. I mean, that's how it's rated. No, I mean, if someone lies on a test, they're lying. You don't know what they're really thinking.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
What's the conclusion about mental health in space?
The conclusion is definitely there's only going to be a small segment of the population that are going to be appropriate for this type of travel.
Yeah.
But that with the correct screening tools, it should be easier to find them, and that once you find them, you can be more confident that they will be stable for the length of their mission, not like they get halfway out and go crazy.
Yeah, based on this one study.
Based on this one study, which is a long... Can you imagine signing up for the study?
I'm sure they got paid.
They did get paid, but that's like two years that you are away from your family, that
Maybe
you can't
they didn't have
go
families.
home. They did get to do like occasional video chats or emails with their family, like you would on.
Well, it's going to be even worse for the people that decide to go to Mars.
But these people didn't get to go anywhere. They just sat in Moscow. Thank you for your sacrifice, gentlemen. My gosh, that's so hard. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about as a specific health concern is cardiovascular function.
Oh, okay, yes.
Okay? So this is another reason for the working out.
I feel like we've already kind of mentioned this too with fluid
Right.
and vacuum pants.
Right. So the heart, usually has to work harder to get blood up into the head, up into things above where it's at. And when there's no gravity or when there's less gravity than we're used to here, it just goes on up there. It doesn't have to really work very hard.
But I'm confused about this too. So the left ventricle, which pumps blood to the rest of the body,
Yes.
how is it working harder to pump blood to the more upper parts of the body, like the head, versus going to the lower parts of the body? Because it's just one pump.
It's working hard. That's one reason why it's so hypertrophied, though. Like if you look at a heart, the left ventricle is super built up, muscly, compared to the rest of it. And that's because it's working on to push blood up and all the way down to your feet. But in a microgravity or environment, it's not really needed at all, or very minimal pumping would be needed.
Okay, so you're just saying there's a certain amount of resistance in the system on Earth because of whatever factors, gravity, and so the heart has to work a certain strength, let's say, in order to pump blood so that it reaches the entire body.
Right.
And in space, that resistance is lower,
Right.
and so the heart has to work less hard.
Yeah. So people become.
I was just confused because you were making it sound like the heart was
It's not
working really
something-
hard to.
No, the heart in general.
Okay.
So when you are in a microgravity environment, your heart will be very quickly deconditioned. So that's part of why they're working out, to try and keep the heart strong as well.
That makes sense. So that's basically, we can get
To
that
try and get some endurance.
same type of effect, like you take someone that's a highly trained endurance athlete and then stop them working out, the heart's going to atrophy, get smaller.
Quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that same type of thing will happen in space.
So a similar effect happens, as I tell my patients often, when you lay in bed and when you don't ever sit up.
Right.
So
okay,
you
that's a better example.
You lay flat in bed, and then finally you're convinced or you're well enough to sit up on the edge of the bed, and then you quickly feel like you're going to pass out and have to lay back down. This happens a lot for people that have been sick for a long time and unable to get out of bed, or unwilling to get out of bed just because they feel really poorly.
Right. Now, the effects of bed rest, too, I think people don't realize how quickly they take effect.
So a lot of the studies that NASA has done looking at how the heart responds to a microgravity environment have been just bed rest studies, where they just have people spending a long time staying horizontal so the heart's not working hard, similarly to how it would be in a microgravity
That
environment.
also sounds awful.
Yeah. Who are these people
How is
that sign
NASA
up for these
getting
studies?
approval for any of this?
Well, people volunteer for it. They sign up for it. A lot of times, astronauts, when they return to Earth, are what we would call orthostatic, referring to patients as well. So their heart isn't able to pump hard enough, and their blood vessels in their legs are not able to contract enough to keep their blood pressure high enough to keep them alert.
Yeah.
And they pass out. So that's common with astronauts returning to Earth, and also common with people that have spent a lot of time laying in bed.
This is almost like it's like the extreme example of a fit person versus a person that doesn't work out. It's the same kind of example, but it's not because of lifestyle choices or exercise choices. It's because of the actual physical environment around
that
you.
they're in. Another problem with cardiovascular function is, I said we'd mention radiation a little bit. So maybe this is where I'll bring it up. When you are on Earth, there's radiation all around you, but you're protected from a large amount of radiation by our atmosphere.
Right.
And when you're out of our atmosphere, even when you're in a spaceship, you are subject to a lot more radiation.
And I've even heard of things like people that work in airplanes, so pilots and whatnot.
Because they're closer to the edge of the atmosphere a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think there's less atmospheric protection from the radiation, and so that's something that they have to watch. And I don't know what the limits are, but they have to adjust their work schedule or whatever to not get too much radiation.
Haven't heard of this. So one aspect of radiation damage is that the tissues that form the blood vessels have been found to not work as well. So you have blood vessels that are not as reactive and are not able to constrict and expand as they should.
Okay.
And that also leads to the problem with the blood pressure. So they don't respond like they should when you get back on Earth. They're not able to tighten up to increase your blood pressure to keep you from passing out.
And this is happening because as the body is making new blood vessel cells, they're getting hit with radiation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in general, radiation is damaging to the human body, right?
Right.
So another aspect that they found with radiation, and which will be interesting with this twin study results, is related to aging. So in our longevity episode, we talked about how there's the telomeres at the end of the chromosomes. Mm-hmm. And as they shorten and shorten and shorten, eventually they start kind of cutting off important information in the chromosomes. And when they are exposed to the radiation in space, they shorten a lot more quickly.
Okay.
So they believe that people that spend a lot of time in space, astronauts, tend to age more rapidly. And so they're hoping to look at, and they expect to find that the twin that stayed on Earth should have aged less than the twin that was in space.
Oh, poor Scott Kelly.
I know. They also have a speculation that people age more rapidly in space because it's a stressful environment, just in general. And
I would buy that.
And the cumulative effect of a lot of stress on the body is that it doesn't regenerate as well. It stresses it out. It adds to more damage.
Stress is bad.
Okay.
In some cases.
So as you can see, actually, I have one more interesting thing I want to talk about as far as health in space. Okay.
All right.
That also relates to a prior episode. So there's the gut microbiome. Do you remember that one?
No.
Oh gosh.
Yes, I remember it. It was the episode where you tried to tell us that the microbiome in our gut is controlling our lives.
Is that what you got out of it?
That's all I remember.
Okay. Well, there's bacteria that live in your gut, right, that can affect how your thoughts are, and that can possibly, based on some mouse studies, and help you digest food and all sorts of stuff.
Right.
Okay. The gut microbiome is changed for people that are in space.
Ooh, just space bacteria?
No. They're changed from what it would be with a normal diet on Earth, though, because of two things. The diet, because you're eating all these packaged and processed foods. They try and get fresh fruits and vegetables, which help kind of replenish a little bit.
Yeah, Matt Damon had potatoes.
He had potatoes.
In The Martian.
That's right. I was like, Matt Damon, he's not an astronaut.
Matt Damon, he's a movie astronaut.
So they try and get fresh food, which have some bacteria, hopefully, to help replenish the microbiome when possible. But that's not, especially with a long-term mission, that might not be possible. So they're looking at growing plants on the ISS right now.
Oh, okay.
Like they have like a little lettuce system to grow salads.
No, I imagine that there's all sorts of challenges with growing stuff.
Yeah.
Gravity included.
Yeah. There was a cute little tweet from Scott Kelly that he had taken a picture of his lettuce plants he was trying to grow.
Yeah.
And they were all shrivelly and looking really sad. And he says, something like, his caption was like, lettuce not doing well. I need to channel my inner Mark Watney or something like that.
That's funny.
Yeah.
A Martian reference again.
Yeah. They also talked about how the radiation can also kill the bacteria in your gut.
Right.
And so that can also alter your microbiome.
That makes sense.
It's not surviving.
Yeah, Mark Watney in The Martian had to use a significant portion of his microbiome to help create an environment for the plants to grow.
So theoretically, enough had survived his trip to Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other... Let's do, since we're already talking about poop, one more thing.
Are we?
Yeah.
I'm not
well,
sure
that's what you
was
just
clear
did.
Yeah.
Another astronaut who shall remain anonymous, he didn't want to say his name, was quoted in an article saying that he had a real hard time pooping with the microgravity.
I can understand why you would want to remain anonymous for that.
Yeah, and as soon as he landed, everything was just right again.
In the famous sitcom, the successful sitcom, The Big Bang Theory, one of the characters is always working on his space toilet, at least for the first while of the...
I don't remember this space toilet.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And they always make fun of him because he's the one that doesn't have a PhD and he only has a master's.
It's Howard, isn't it?
And his job at working at the university or NASA or whatever is to try and design a toilet that doesn't need gravity.
So yeah, because normally your digestive system relies a little bit on gravity to move things down. I mean, it has muscle contraction, peristalsis as well.
And they always teach us that in physical therapy school.
What?
That if someone hasn't gotten out of bed for a while
Yeah.
and you come in as the physical therapist to get them out of bed, if they're going to walk anywhere, your goal should be to walk to the bathroom because
Well,
gravity gets things moving.
It's totally true. And this is the thing I'll tell people when they're reluctant to get out of bed. There's lots of reasons that it would be good for them. But a lot of times people end up being constipated when they're not moving. And I'll say, well, if you get up and walk, I think that's going to help you be able to go to the bathroom. And it does a lot of the time.
Right.
Which is for a similar reason. Gravity is able to take hold and help out a little bit. So there are, as you can see, there are a lot of health challenges that need to be figured out before I think we're ready for this long-distance space travel, long-term space travel.
Now, what do you think about this?
What?
If we just forget about all the health challenges and just figure out how to make gravity on a spaceship?
It would help a lot. It would
that
solve
the
a
main-
lot of
is
the
that
problems.
the main issue?
And radiation.
Oh, so we need
Shielding. We need some better shielding.
better radiation shielding, and we need a spinny centrifugal force gravity thing.
So NASA, that's clearly what you need to focus on. I'm sure you haven't thought about any of this.
Instead of focusing on vacuum pants research.
Now, there's a lot of other interesting things about space medicine that I didn't even talk about. So if you are interested, there's a lovely NASA website.
Okay.
So it's nasa.gov/HRP, which is their human research project.
All right.
So you can look at there and find all sorts of information.
That does sound really interesting.
Yeah, there's a space medicine program, I think, at Baylor University. That's in Houston.
Now,
NASA.
in the Martian, they sent up a doctor with the crew as part of the crew.
Yeah, and that is a lot of astronauts currently are doctors as part of their training.
That's probably
I don't know about a lot. There are astronauts that are also doctors.
Yeah, it would seem like that would be a smart decision to
Mm-hmm.
send a medical professional on the trip.
Yeah, a lot of other articles talked about the connection between space medicine, like taking care of people that are sick, and then taking care of people that are sick in like isolated environments, such as people on Antarctica or people in like really isolated areas that don't have a lot of resources. Like, how can the things that might work in space where they also are isolated and have few resources be translated to those sorts of environments?
That's an interesting connection. So like how can the doctors use their resources better in these isolated
what
situations?
are things that solve those problems of isolation
cool.
and limited resources to solve medical challenges that come up? Like, what if an astronaut's gone on a 2.5-year trip and they find that they have cancer or appendicitis or,
and there's
things
not
like
going to
this.
be there's not going to be the right type of
What do they do?
medical equipment that
Yeah.
they need there to treat it.
Maybe not.
Very interesting.
Oh, I feel like this episode was a bit all over the place, but I had trouble doing the research because there's so much information.
And sounds like a lot of stuff that we're not too sure about yet.
Yeah, that's the thing with this. There's so much more to know.
Well,
I wish
as
it was.
always.
Oh, wait. Please see the resources I'll put up on the website, and there is so much more to find out too.
If you're interested, you should do your own research.
Yeah, and it's a super, super interesting topic. I so wish that we could just get into a spaceship and fly around like they do in Battlestar Galactica. Not like them. They're fleeing a terrible war.
But they do have gravity on their spaceships.
But they do. They walk around real easily. They don't seem to have a problem with radiation, although that lady gets cancer.
Yeah, I think she already had it, though.
She already did.
Yeah.
Maybe she'd
But
already done a lot of flying.
they did have to try and figure out some limited resources treatments, right?
Spoiler alert, she got cancer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, that's in like the first episode. It's not really a spoiler.
From like years ago. It's okay.
Spoiler alert for a show that came out in 2002. If you enjoyed the episode, please share us with a friend or give us a rating on iTunes.
You can visit our website, placebopodcast.com, for show notes or to send us any suggestions or feedback.
We also have a Facebook page where you can find us.
Thank you to James Aiken for our music.
And thank you to everyone for listening. We'll be back next week with a new episode.
Goodbye.
Bye!